reference to as under the name of Joseph?
Well, Lawrence Gardner and I have to part company on a few things like that. And you're going to have to determine what you think. I'm not in a dictatorial position or vice versa, but I will tell you this. All the evidence shows James was killed in Jerusalem in 62 AD. Josephus and all the early church sources give extensive, detailed descriptions on what happened. So there may be other relatives. In fact, I think you see in the third part of this book here, I'll show you this is the paperback, but actually the hardback is a little bit easier to handle and prettier. In this hardback here, the last third, which we have to cut out of the German edition because it's too long, the last third deals with Jesus' brothers as apostles and James in communities in the East. And the names of the chapters, I'll get to the point in a minute, is the apostleship of James, Cephas and John, James the first to see Jesus, Last Supper scenarios, Jesus' brothers as apostles, Simon Bar-Cleophas and Simon the Zealot, and then in James in communities in the East, Judas the brother of James and the conversion of King Akbar, the conversion of Queen Helen and the Ethiopian queen's eunuch, Judas Thomas and Theuda the brother of the Just One. Now I venture to say almost not one of those topics any of you has ever even heard of. That's how little information is disseminated on this subject. Yet we can spend 300 pages on those subjects of all new data that's never revealed to you. So the last section here deals with Jesus' other brothers. Lawrence Gardner and his sources may be mistaken, I can't say. Jesus had brothers, Judas for instance, whom I think is confused with Judas Iscariot. Iscariot being a play on Sicarios, assassin, which to my mind is also playing on Christian, because Iscariot, he's a Christian, but his name is Iscariot, it's Sicarios, which is what Josephus pejoraticizes as the most extreme wing of the Zealot movement that committed suicide on Masada. And they didn't commit suicide because they were cowards, they committed suicide because they believed in resurrection of the dead and they didn't want to be polluted. But that's a whole other story that Page and Lee covered and so on. But this Judas the Zealot, whoever he was, this second or third brother of Jesus, did have children. And that is a known thing. So in all our sources, James is considered to be a lifelong virgin. All the sources confirm that, whether it's true or not. Hey, I can dispute sources and I'm happy to do that. But I think the virginity of Mary, I didn't cover a lot of this stuff, it's in the book. I think the virginity of Mary didn't come from the virginity of Mary. I think it came from the virginity of James. In James's case, lifelong sexual abstinence, I hope I'm not keeping you by sending you out the microphone there, but this triggers a lot of ideas, what you're saying, which I didn't cover. Lifelong, and that's what I need to trigger stuff, lifelong abstinence was helped by bathing in cold water. And Josephus tells us that he had a teacher in the wilderness called Bannus who wore only vegetable clothes. But James wore only linen, vegetable clothing, because he stayed away from animal hair. I also think the picture of John the Baptist wearing camel's hair and so on, and skin is taken from Elijah 800 years before, but has nothing to do with the first century. All these groups wore linen, white linen. And then I think this Bannus character deciphers a lot about James, that he was in sexual continence, a lifelong virgin, as it were. Now, early Christianity has developed the idea of the perpetual virginity of Mary. But that came in the 2nd century. That's not in the Gospels. And it's not anywhere else in the 1st century. But it's a 2nd century doctrine that's aimed at James. The reason is, it's first given to you in a document called the Proto-Evangelium of James, an apocryphal gospel given to you in authoritative church manner that claims to be put into James's mouth, he being the closest living relative of the Lord, that he was not the brother of Jesus, that he was only the half-brother, the milk brother, the step-brother. So this is James supposedly testifying that he's not the brother, but that's doctored. And then in the process, he testifies to the perpetual virginity of Mary, that Mary was a virgin before Christ was born and after he was born, which is, of course, patently absurd. But the point is that, you see, where in Mary it makes no sense at all, in James it makes all kinds of sense in the sexual continence idea. And I think the lifelong virginity of James moves over to the virginity of Mary in doctrine in doctrinal terms. And the perpetual virginity of Mary is directed exactly against people like James, because it's trying to say that Mary couldn't have had any other children except Jesus, because she was a virgin before and after the birth of Jesus, and that rules out the birth of the other brothers. But we know in the Gospels don't show any embarrassment about saying that his mother and brothers came to him. And the Gospels enumerate the names of the other brothers: James, Jude, Joses, and Simon. But the thing is, the Gospels like to downplay them by giving you slogans like, "A prophet is never accepted in his own house, among his own people, and by his own kin." We love those kind of statements, and yet they're directed against the family and the succession of the family. And in that passage where it speaks about his mother and his brothers coming to him, they were kept outside. Jesus has kept them outside because of all the throng of little people that thronged around him, and they couldn't get close to him because the throng of little people, us, the new mission Gentile converts, are close to Jesus, and his family is removed from Jesus. So where Leonard got those materials is probably from genealogies that he was conversant with. But how accurate those genealogies in terms of the total mythologization that's already developing in the 2nd century is difficult for me to understand. That is, those genealogies may represent information of the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. I don't know how accurate they are. And they may have been confused on this issue. They may have known that Jesus had brothers, and that, in fact, some of the brothers had children. One, we know, and Eusebius tells us, that the grandchildren of Judas, the brother of Jesus, were rounded up by Vespasian. That's all in Eusebius. So we know that one of the other brothers, not James, had children. But honestly, from my sources, and I can only tell you what my sources say, and I don't want to gainsay someone that you love, my sources don't carry that out. Now, you're the one who has to be the final arbiter of these facts. All I can tell you is there is a brother of Jesus who did have children, and that's Judas, we know, for a fact from the contemporary sources. James seems to have been a lifelong virgin, as Epiphanius, Eusebius, and others tell us. He seemed to be a daily bather. He bathed in cold water to avoid this sexual problem, and it all got hung on Mary. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the best I can do with it.
Close enough, thank you much.
Huh?
Close enough, thank you much.
No, I'll give you the other. There's another part to it you had?
No, I was just hoping you would elaborate a little more.
Well, I don't want to disappoint you. I hate to disappoint people. I only do the best I can. I don't want to mislead you either. That's the data I have.
You are safe.
Okay.
I am not disappointed.